to this lesson number 10 of these CAMEX sessions. I'm very glad uh, to be your speaker today, and we welcome you. We all know that we are experiencing bad moments because of coronavirus pandemic, and we have to be confined in our houses because of the quarantine declared by the government. However, this is because of our health, and we all have to take care of each other. So let's begin. Today's lesson is lesson number 10, as you know. The title of this lesson is Playing and Creating, and we will cover the section of topics. Okay, so my name is Eduardo Rocha Alvarez. I'm an English teacher at Británico, by Británico, excuse me. I'm also a law student at Antonio Ruiz de Montoya University, and I'm a former teenage leader. Before we start, I would like to cover 3 points. The first one is during my presentation, I will show you some important definitions to enrich the comprehension of the topics. They are all taken from the online Cambridge Dictionary. And I have to say that this is actually my favorite one. Why? Because this dictionary does not only offers you a variety of definitions and concepts and thesaurus, but examples. And besides that, you can listen to the right pronunciation, whether you're studying British English or American English. So it's very useful. The second point is, I will ask some questions all along. Keep in mind that I do not expect you to answer them. They're only for you to think about the possible answers, which means that I will use it as a strategy to teach you so you can comprehend better. And the last point is once the lesson is over, there will be some time to ask and respond questions. So please, I would like to ask you to wait until the very end of the session, and then you will have some time to ask me some questions about what we will discuss now. Okay, so let's begin. This is the content we will cover. The first one, okay, is uh, imagination and creativity. The second point is communication. The third point is gadgets and inventions. The fourth point is toys. The fifth point is messages. And the sixth point is telephone conversations. Okay, so this is like an overview of what we will cover today. As I mentioned before, we will talk about imagination and creativity. So you can imagine. Let's begin with one question. What do we see in the picture on the right? Okay, those are nuts and are brain shaped, and they are colored plastic nuts. Okay, so what do they represent? Basically, small pieces of an engine called mind. Mind is related to our brain, which controls the basic functions of our body. Now, what is a mind? It is the part of a person that makes it possible for him or her to think, feel emotions, and understand things. So I would like to go back to the previous slide and now have a second look at this picture. So what do you think each of the nuts represent? Yes, probably the yellow one represents a thought, the red one, a feeling, and the orange one, another feeling. Who knows? But all of them working together in the end produce imagination. Okay, here you have two concepts for imagination and one concept for creativity. The first concept of imagination is the ability to form pictures in the mind. That means that this is not necessarily a real situation, but it is just a thought. It's all in your mind, as it said in Great Britain. Also, is the ability to think of new ideas. New ideas means that they are original, okay? So let's go with creativity now. It is defined as the ability to produce or use original ideas. Now, if we make a comparison between imagination on one side and creativity on the other side, we will figure it out that both of them are similar concepts or similar ideas. Why? Because imagination is defined as the ability to think of new ideas, and creativity is defined as the ability to produce or use original ideas, which is similar to new ideas. Let's continue. Now let's go with the second point, communication. What do we see in the picture? Okay, please have a look at them, at it, excuse me. Well, there is a lady in the middle of two boys, and the two boys are talking. Well, the one on the left is talking on the phone. The one on the right is connected, probably typing to a friend of his. But the girl is trying to do something with them. She is trying to talk with them or communicate with them, but she doesn't get any attention from them, sadly. But well, let's see the definition of communication. Communication is defined as the exchange of information and the expression of feeling that can result, I put emphasis in it can, in understanding, okay? So can, as we know, expresses possibility, not certainty. But if there is good exchange of information and good expression of feeling, we will have as a result good understanding or sympathy. In other words, we will have a good relationship between both parties involved. Now that we have said the definition or the concept of communication, we can come to the conclusion that the girl is not communicating effectively with the two boys that she has at the sides. Now, what do we need for communication? As we saw before, at least two parties. It can be persons or groups of people, of course. That means that it's not possible to have communication with with myself. It is possible to some extent. Sometimes we think and we sort of have a communication with ourselves. That's true, but that's not what is normally uh, known all around the globe. So normally communication is between at least two parties. It could be three, four, etc. What else do we need for communication? We need the same language. It will be very difficult for a person to communicate with a foreign person if he or she doesn't know the language the other person speaks, unless there is an interpreter, of course. We also need listening and talking skills. It's highly important to listen first and then, only then, talk. Why this? Because otherwise we won't get the whole information and we can come to wrong conclusions. It's also important to have a message. If we don't have a message, we don't have communication. We also need a mean of communication or a way of communication, values, and other skills. What do I mean by values? I mean like the basic ones, respect, tolerance, honesty, and so on. And when I talk about the skills, I refer to the ability to communicate effectively, uh, having proper body language, like your pay attention to your facial expressions, how you move your hands, how you stand, and so on. So let's continue. What means of communication do we know? We have previously said that so as to have communication, we do need means of communication. But what are they? In the first place, we have oral means of communication. We all know them. Face-to-face chats are probably the most common ones. Public events, such as uh, concerts, maybe church services, or plays at the theater. The radio, online platforms like WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram, etc. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot more that we don't even know. But I would like to stop a little bit at the radio. Why? Because probably here in Lima, where I live, and probably some of you live as well, the radio is not as used as it was a decade ago, perhaps. But in some places, in some especially rural places, like the countryside, in the highlands, in the jungle, where there are no other means of communication, the radio is the only one. And they listen to the news, they probably mm, get to know about the next match, the next football match, which is the most popular sport here in Peru. And other things, probably some of them listen to music, uh, and it's totally respectable as well. It's what they have, isn't it? Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit about the written means of communication. We know the newspaper, letters, the email, Outlook, Gmail, Yahoo, etc. Social networking sites such as WhatsApp, Messenger, Telegram, Hangouts. We know that these apps are very useful, and it's not only about oral communication. I mean by sending noise votes, uh, which is pretty used nowadays. I meant voice notes, excuse me, but to send pictures and other things that we manage very well. Finally, we have audiovisual communication, the TV, the cinema, online platforms, and I only want to mention the most recent ones, let's say, those that are fashionable nowadays, TikTok, Zoom, which is the platform I'm using, and Google Meet, Skype, and other ones. Okay, so we have talked about means of communication, we have talked about creativity and imagination. Now let's talk about gadgets and inventions. What is a gadget? A gadget is a small device or machine with a particular purpose or aim. What do we see in the picture on the right? Well, what I see is a mobile phone, a TV, or a computer, I'm not sure, a tablet, a laptop, an MP3 player, earpods or a headset, a webcam, electronic watch, pen drive, another camera similar to the past one, an SD card, and a mouse. I assume that most of us have these devices or these gadgets in our houses. But, well, I think that this somehow responds the first question because it is what are the most useful gadgets nowadays? Probably most of the ones that are shown in the picture. I can't think of any other right now because I don't consider myself as a technological person or technology person. But what are their advantages or disadvantages? That all depends on the person that is using these gadgets. Because as any other thing or object, it can have a proper use or a detrimental one. If we talk about a child, probably this has to be uh, the child needs to be taken care by their parents, of course. Their parents need to be careful with them. They need to supervise what websites they visit, what videos they watch on YouTube, who they communicate with, because in so many cases, there are strangers communicating with children, and that's totally rejectable. But if we talk about a young man or woman, it's not the same thing, of course. We assume that they are already responsible, not only legally, but also morally, psychologically, mentally. So that all relies on the use that is given by the person who is with a mobile phone or a laptop mostly. The second part of this subheading is inventions. What an invention is, according to this dictionary that was mentioned at the beginning of the lesson, an invention is something that has never been made before. In other words, something that is totally new, that nobody even imagined about their existence. But what is one of the most recent inventions? I mean, the pandemic started in March 2020, and since then, our lives have changed. Not forever, because I think that would be an exaggeration, but for so many years, I think. The other day, I read an article in which they said that it will take us about 7 years to recover totally from all the effects of the pandemic and the quarantine and unemployment and poverty, and oof, the list has no end. But well, we know that since the pandemic took place, scientists and other medicine students, people interested, have been looking for a vaccine for this coronavirus, terrible disease, for this disease. Wow. So I would say that this is one of the most recent inventions. As we know, some of them have been tested in many countries around the globe. Uh, but let's talk a bit about the second question. Is there a consensus on the effectiveness on the coronavirus vaccine? The answer to this question is a total no. Why not? Because scientists don't agree with each other. They don't necessarily come to the same conclusions. Some claim that the vaccine is totally necessary and all people should get the vaccine, and it doesn't matter if it has side effects. But on the other hand, there are some scientists as well that claim that having vaccination is risky, and let's say we don't need to face the side effects. Probably they are waiting for something else, like from a miracle or from other alternative. We don't know for sure. But this is certainly a difficult topic, a difficult to talk topic. Okay, so let's move on. Now, let's talk a bit about toys. And you may say, what connection does the COVID vaccine has with toys? No link at all. But well, the vaccine was addressed because I was talking a little bit about inventions. Now we talk about toys, and we will discover that at some point it has some connection. Let's read the first question. Is playing with toys important for children to develop creativity? Why? We saw in the previous slides that creativity and imagination are both similar. So let's read the answer. Yes, definitely. That is because this way they can start creating stories and real life situations. Yes, I totally agree with this answer. For example, a toddler with a cube. So you can imagine a toddler, probably he or she doesn't know exactly which words to use, but still they have some knowledge because they are under acquisition 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 days a month, 365 days a year. And they are all the time listening to their mother or their father or their aunt, their uncle, their cousin, their neighbor, and to so many people. So it's totally obvious that they will have some vocabulary in their mind. But let's come back to this example. A toddler with a cube. Let's imagine that it's a boy. So he says, hey, cube, how are you? Now you're going to be my imaginary friend. And he is going to wait for the answer from the cube. Or probably he is going to play the role of the cube, even though the cube has no life. And the cube is going to say back to him, hey, how are you? I'm also glad to meet you. And they are going to continue the conversation with an hypothetical case, of course. But this way, the guy at the end is going to have the necessity for creating or remembering some words and uh, imagining scenes in their minds. And that's going to be a complete achieved goal, believe me. And it's, people know about it, but especially teachers who work with children, not only with babies, but with toddlers and with children in general. Okay, so we have a second question. What role do toys play? Well, as you can imagine, they are not only useful to entertain, it's not only for pleasure, in other words, but many of them have educational purposes. For example, how to count or the alphabet. If you search on YouTube, you will find plenty of videos about this topic. There are songs who use objects from real life, and they start introducing the children to this new world. And of course, they learn how to count by singing, by playing games, and it's amazing. I'm pretty sure that most of us learn this way. Or the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. But probably singing this song with a toy or with many toys, who knows? That would make it more interesting. Great. So we will go to the next section with it, which is messages. And somehow messages are connected with toys, with creativity and imagination, with communication, because, well, let's read the concept first before I get so excited, because one of my passions is teaching. Okay, a message is a short piece of information that you give to a person when you cannot speak to them directly. So in other words, it means that it's an indirect uh, piece of information sent and received from one person to other, or from two people to more people. It can depend on that situation. But how messages are connected with creativity and imagination, for instance, because so as to deliver a piece of information, we need to think first. Well, sometimes I acknowledge that uh, many of us, myself included, send messages not checking before. And because of this, we make huge mistakes. And then we repent if we are aware of that. Of course, not many people are aware of that, sadly. But anyway, this is not paradise. And therefore, creativity is needed to send messages. Especially if you're in a relationship, imagine that you met a person some months ago and you feel like really, really in love with this person. So you want to give them flowers, chocolates, and other romantic things. And well, nowadays it's not that common to write letters by hand, but still some people do it, and I appreciate that. But of course, to write a letter, you need to be very creative. Okay, let's read the question before I keep talking, because as you have noticed, I love talking. I'm a very talkative person. What does it mean when a person reads your message but does not reply it straight away? Okay, we all have like this kind of mobile phone, smartphones, and we use it from the morning till the night, right? From very early in the morning till very late in the night. Okay, so what does it mean? What does it mean when a person reads your message but does not reply right away? Some of us get frustrated. We start creating stories in our mind. We say like, oh, what is this person doing? I'm totally sure, I'm totally convinced that he or she is not paying attention to me because he or she doesn't care about me. He or she is ignoring me on purpose. He or she doesn't want me to be in their lives. But it's not like that, at least not always. You know, they also live a life as you do, as I do, as my family does. They have some stuff to get done. So please don't get frustrated or sad, or don't cry if a person leaves you with these two check marks. But I also have this picture. I put it first actually, and it's okay. And I think it's one of the most common messages we receive. Okay, like it doesn't matter how long your text has been, the other person may still respond to you. Okay, not more, not nothing else. Just a simple okay. But well, perhaps you may say that okay is less harmful than a double check mark. For me, it's kind of the same actually, but it all depends on how you take it. Take it easy. How to sound enthusiastic when typing a message? Well, the answer for me, at least, is simple. By using emojis, exclamation or question marks, capital letters, etc. Here we have a picture of the most common emojis, I think. The first one is the happy one, the second one, the in love one, the third one, the crying, well, the sad, let's say. The fourth one with the tongue, another happy face, the crying emoji, and the list continues, right? So some people don't like emojis, uh, we have to say, even though they add like feelings to the text. Well, sometimes we send like the laughing emoji and we're not even smiling, but commonly they express feelings. But some people don't like it though. We need to be tolerant and still have good relationships with them. It's not a problem. Okay, let's move on. Now let's talk about telephone conversations. I'm pretty sure that at least in Latin America, everyone has had telephone conversations as minimum once in their lives. I'm not saying that everyone has a mobile phone or a telephone at home. I'm saying that they have used a telephone once in their life, or that they have had telephone conversations. They may borrow a phone from a neighbor, from a relative, from a friend, and satisfy that necessity. I would say that it's a necessity. No, it's not vital as eating, as drinking, as doing other things, but we need to be communicated. So that's why I put this question here. What are useful tips for phone conversations? Why would I or would you be interested in tips for phone conversations? Because I suppose that you have a phone at home, and if you don't, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or anyone has a phone. So let's begin. We have here 5 tips. Let's start by the first one, the letter A. Save the number properly with the dialing code. Okay, why do I say this? It's not because you don't pay attention when the other person is telling you their phone number. What I mean is that the other person, maybe someone you just met, might not be interested in giving you their personal information on the first date. But at the same time, this person maybe or doesn't want to say like a big no to you. And the other alternative that this person is going to find so as not to reject you is to give you the wrong number. But I give you a tip, take notes please. What I do is the following. I take my phone, I ask the other person for their phone number, and once I finish, I save the number and I say, okay, do you have your phone with you? And obviously, I have previously checked that the other person has it. And so I ring and I say, hey, I'm going to ring you. Please answer. If the person ends up clean, that means that it was the wrong number. Now, let's see the info in the brackets. With dialing code, why is it important? Well, uh, because in the USA, for instance, if you are in a town, let's imagine in Longmont, Colorado, and if you want to call to a relative in Queens, New York City, you need to add a dialing code. What's a dialing code? It's a series of numbers used before the main phone number when you call someone outside your city or your country. Okay, so that's why it's important to take notes of the phone number with a dialing code. Now let's go to letter B, address the other person by their name. If my name, as you know, is Eduardo, I wouldn't like to be called by Pedro, Josue, Victor. It's not that I don't like these names, but it's not my name. So that is why so important for you to ask in the very beginning, hey, what's your name? Okay? So as to introduce, so as to let the other person introduce themselves. Okay, great. Now, let us see, remember the importance of voice projection. It's what I'm doing. Now I'm giving a speech to many people, and well, now it's online, but It's not the same if I speak like this as if I whisper. It's not the same. So you need to pay special attention to how you project your voice. Also, take into account the register. What's register? The style, okay? So, in other words, whether it's formal or informal. Formal, when you're talking to a police officer, for instance, you want to prosecute someone at the police station, and you need to use maybe not technical like language, okay? Like not very complex vocabulary, but you need to show respect to the person you're talking to. It's not the same as if you are talking to one of your friends. It's totally different. You can say, "Hey, what's up? How is it going? What's going on?" These are questions that you will ask a police officer, for instance, or maybe a doctor in an appointment. Okay, and finally, be polite. It's free, and it's not a secret that it's free. How can you be polite? Well, there are many ways to show that you are polite. Beginning with greetings. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and say bye as well, but also asking for favors in a polite way, say thank you, and so on. Okay, so now let's go to our conclusions. Apparently time flew. Wow. Well, the first conclusion I have here is our imagination or creativity can be developed while playing. Okay, we saw in the beginning that children learn by playing, especially with toys. Okay, so they start, like thinking, creating things in their mind, and they go further and further. Now, the second conclusion is to be communicative, all parties involved have to be willing to participate in the communicative process, of course, and ideally speak the same language. Okay, let's put emphasis in all, okay? All parties, that means that not only some of them, but every party involved. They all need to participate, okay? And why do I say ideally speak the same language? Because, as I mentioned before, they may have an interpreter or even a translator. Now it's so easy to get, like, you just Google it and you get, but of course it's not the same as if you know the language. The third conclusion, most inventions, especially gadgets, have helped the human development. As I said, that depends on the use. That is why I say most and not all inventions. And we already know what a gadget is, which is an electronic device. The fourth conclusion, playing with toys helps cultivate creativity. Okay, so that's connected with the previous conclusion, which is the first one. Imagination or creativity can be developed while playing. The fifth one, the telephone connects people immediately. Okay, that's not a secret. Messages or SMS which stands for Short Messages Service, are usually more efficient than other means of communications. And that's why it's highly advisable to use them, especially when we are facing national crises such as earthquake. Well, probably it's not national, but local crisis. And this work way better than internet connection, believe me. Okay, now it's time for you to ask questions regarding the topic. Do you have any questions? If so, now it's your time to ask. I will be very glad to hear some of you. Please, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask now. Now, well, if you do not have any questions, here is my personal info. Here you have my email address, erocha725@gmail.com, and my phone number 997-935-804. Thank you very much for joining us today, and see you on Thursday. Thanks again for your time. It has been a real pleasure to be with you today. See you next time.